guess we'll get started. We're in Proverbs 3 today, so y'all are probably familiar with Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, right? I think we've all heard it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will direct your paths. Now, depending on your translation, it'll say paths or it may say steps. So I like to think of this as steps to me, because there's other scriptures that say the Lord is a light and a lamp onto your feet, right? So, we try to take the whole counsel of God, because a lot of times we'll get like one piece of it here and one piece of it there, and you kind of need to put it all together. But if you're like me, I said this morning, it was like, I want a Jeep with the light bar and brights so I can see as far as I can, right? But I'm not God. God never promised that. He promised the light at your feet, which means that if we listen to Him, He's going to direct the next step. He's not going to get you too far, right? And we have to be dependent on Him, because otherwise, like me, I'll start running a direction and not look for the light on where I need to step next, right? I think of, how many of y'all saw Indiana Jones, right? Indiana Jones, how he had to step carefully, right? That's kind of how we are, right, with the Lord. He's going to tell us where to step so we can avoid the bear traps, and His timing is perfect, right? So sometimes we want to run and He's going, no, you just need to take small steps through this section, right? So that's the kind of the big takeaway from this section for me, and we'll kind of go through it. So let's go ahead and read verses 1 and 2. I didn't highlight there, sorry.
My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands, for length of days and long life and peace they will add to you.
So there's a couple of things here. This reminds me of the 10 Commandments, with honor your father and your mother, right? So He's saying that if you keep the commandments, it'll lengthen your days, and long life and peace will be added to you. Now, once again, we need to take these in context. Proverbs is a book, it's wisdom literature, which is different than like the red letters of Jesus. So this is the wisdom literature you need to take in context, right? So we have Job, we have Ecclesiastes, and we have Proverbs. Those are the three big texts on the wisdom literature. So what Proverbs is going to tell you is it's going to give you the wise sayings that are essentially the high probability items, right? Like, you can choose to go bungee jumping, but your probability of injury is higher if you bungee jump, right? So that's what this is saying, is that it's not a promise that you're going to have a long life and all of this, but it's saying if you do follow His commandments, 80%, that you're going to be blessed with a long life and all of those things. Whereas if you choose to go off on your own and bungee jump, then, you're going to bear the price of that statistically. And then the peace, we're going to talk about that more. But the peace of God is only through God. We have a lot of people that have set up little gods, and there's no peace in that. So, that's also a mark of, we talked about this morning, but that's a mark of your relationship, right? So, you want to take a temperature of where you are with God. Good temperature is the peace that you have. If you're unsettled and you don't have peace, that probably means that your relationship is off with the Lord. Because we shouldn't be anxious. We shouldn't be like the world. The world's in a tizzy right now because of the bombing of Iran, right? We got people melting down over it. But as a Christian, you shouldn't be nervous about these things, because I assure you God is not surprised, right? Okay. Let's go on to 3 through 4.
It says, let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man.
So, mercy and truth, right? And depending on your translation, I think someone had some different words on the interpretation there. So, understand Greek words have several different meanings. So, if you pick up a different translation, it might give you different words there. But what we're really talking about is character qualities. If you're going to be marked by those character qualities, then you're going to find favor with God, and you're going to have favor with man. Now, the favor with man is going to be the people that have those characteristics, right? And likewise, we've kind of already talked about this, but, I think last week we were talking about, it was last week or the week before, it was talking about the companion of fools, right? So we need to seek out people that have these characteristics. So sometimes in life, you have to make an assessment, just like God says to search your heart and, search me, is there any wicked ways in me? You need to kind of do the same with your friends sometimes, because the friends sometimes don't meet the definition. I've had to have this talk with myself and with my wife and other things with friends, right? Because we're going to be the sum of the 5 friends we hang around. So if you want to change your circumstances, hang around 5 wise people that have mercy and truth. And your friends will speak truth to you, and sometimes that truth is uncomfortable, right? And that's why it's good to have friends that will speak truth to you, because they will make you a better person, right?
You ain't Job.
What?
You ain't Job.
Well, Job, we kind of talked about this morning, but Job, his friends probably read Proverbs, but they didn't pick up on, read the room, right? They didn't read that he was the exception, right, to the rule, and that he was righteous. They just assumed that he was evil because these things befell him, right? And his wife,
Kind of like we saw the season of Pharisees with the healing of the guy before.
yeah, exactly. Or in even the disciples, remember when he gave sight to the blind man? Who sinned, him or his parents,
Yeah.
right?
No one sinned.
In that case, the sin was for God's glory. It was the exception, right? Sometimes it's the exception. That's why we were kind of talking about this being wisdom literature. But here we need to make sure that we're around those people. And the Lord may not like, or the world, not the Lord, the world may not like you if you're a truth teller, but the people will appreciate you and respect you. I know one of the things that I like to do that served me well, at work, is if I screw up, I promptly admit it and I own it. And what I've found is that makes people trust me at work, because we're all going to screw up. But I'm the type that I'll send an email and I'll broadcast it to everybody, and I'll say, okay, this one's on me. I screwed up. I'm in the process, I'm gonna fix it, it'll be done by then. I don't point fingers, I don't make excuses, I just say, look, I screwed up.
Let's people know
Right.
you're real.
And then that way people trust me and people come to me. I've had people come to me and say, Cody, oh my God, how would you send an email and admit to that? And I said, I'm not perfect. I admit to it all the time. You know? And the quicker I admit to it, the quicker I don't have to hide or cover up or something like that. But we're in a culture where that's very counterculture. People won't admit their mistakes.
That's
Okay.
what was all your heart, you know, doing today, because you know your way, just doing all your past, the correct your past. That's right.
Yep. Matter of fact, that's our next verse. You wanna, I think you already said it, 3, 5, and 6, right? So let's kind of break this down. Obviously, you have to have the Lord in your heart. So how do we do that today? How do you get the Lord in your heart?
Prayer.
Prayer is one way.
Meditation.
Meditation.
That was you.
The other side of that is reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Prayer is how you talk to God, the Bible is how he talks back.
Right.
Conversations
So
are two-sided.
you got to get it into your head before it can get into your heart, right? So we got to be able to read it. We got to be able to be deep in the Word. We got to seek understanding, right? So that was kind of our whole Israel talk before class started with, you know, who is an Israelite this side of the cross? What did Paul say is a true Israelite? It wasn't circumcised by the flesh, but it was circumcised by the heart, right? Is the true Israelite. Who is the seed of Abraham? It's not the physical seed, it's the seed of faith. It's the ones, we're children of Abraham, right? We're all grafted in, right? And sometimes we look to the outward, but Abraham, it was counted towards righteousness, right? Read Hebrews 11 carefully. It will tell you that it was all by faith. It was all by righteousness, right? Sometimes we get off path there. Now, lean not on your own understanding. How many of y'all have decided I'm going to go this way and do it my way, and how's that worked out for you?
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of the time I went in my 20s, went to a club, went out drinking, and then decided I'd go four-wheeling in my Jeep at night, and I'm going down in, and it just gets worse and worse. You know, it's just getting deeper and deeper, and at some point you go, well, I can't turn around, so this trail's got to, you know, get me back out. And of course, I stuck my Jeep all the way up to the axles at high centered, you know, high centered it, 1 in the morning, and I walk home 2 miles in muddy boots, right? And then I have to get friends with other four-wheel drive to pull me out the next day and miss work, right? That's because I decided to do things my way, right? How many of y'all feel like you've metaphorically, if you haven't gotten stuck in the mud, you've metaphorically done it, right?
Currently stuck in the mud. Just-
Yeah, not my proudest moment in life, but okay, acknowledge him in all your ways. What does that mean to you? How do we acknowledge the Lord in all of our ways?
Direct with mind, speak, do what's right.
Okay, 10 Commandments is definitely one way. Anything else?
And the way that you speak and the way that you treat others.
Yeah. What was the whole law that Jesus boiled down to 2, right?
Well,
Love the Lord with all your heart, and love your neighbor.
Yeah. I would say that, you know, we kind of talked about this before here, but we have an epidemic, I would say, in the church where people accept Jesus as Savior, but they don't accept Him as Lord, right? If you accept Him as Lord, that means You're gonna acknowledge him in all your ways. That means even your wallet. That means your service. That means, you know, like these guys all showed up yesterday morning for breakfast. The attendance was in half at the men's breakfast than it usually is because it was a work day. But we all got out there and worked, right? And we're gonna be blessed for that, right? That's acknowledging him. That's showing love. That's physical love. Going out there with chainsaws and tractors, clearing somebody's land, right? It doesn't always have to be money, but it can be service, right? It's in all of our ways, right? You have something?
Yeah, I'm digging a little deeper. It's like kind of like with Peter, when he denied, to not deny Christ in those moments. To not let the, how do you put it, when you want to say something to somebody but you're afraid to because of their reactions. Basically, you don't want to mention Christ because, oh, I don't want to lose my friend, or I don't want to upset him, I don't want to get in an argument, when at the end of the day, it's our duty.
Yeah. And persecution is gonna come when that happens. I have a prime example. I had a issue at work. I got called in from my manager and another coworker's manager because she overheard me on the phone. I was scheduling my grass delivery, and I said, well, we can do it on Thursday because that's Juneteenth and it's a federal holiday. And I said, by the way, that kind of irks me that as a federal employee, I don't get Easter off, but I get Juneteenth and I get Columbus Day and all this. And then she filed a complaint on me saying that I was racist because I was against Juneteenth. So I had to go into my office and I had to explain to them, and I had my Christ cup that Lindsay made me, and I said, look, I said, Christ is who I work for. And I said, the most important holiday of all of them, Christmas, 4th of July, it doesn't matter, is Easter. And I said, Easter is the resurrection. Without the resurrection, there is no Christ. And I said, the government doesn't give me that day off. And I said, that is my, it's nothing against Juneteenth. I don't care, it's against all holidays. And then I had to sit down and talk with her, and she goes, Easter? Well, Easter's on Sunday. We all get that off. And I was like, Good Friday.
You did it 9 o'clock.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, if you acknowledge him in all your ways, you're going to get pushback. But people are very clear where I sit, right? And I've made it abundantly clear. And by the way, that is not the first time I've been called into the office for faith. Okay. How do we lean on our own understanding rather than trusting fully in the Lord?
You got to lean on something that God has passion for other things in your life. You just lean on that. You can Bible now, other situations, and not allowing scripture, not allowing the word to direct you, allowing your own understanding.
Living by the ways of the Lord is.
I think of the garden, right? In the garden, they had the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So prior to the garden, Genesis 2, which a lot of people don't read very often, but that's kind of the model of what we should be like with the Lord, right? Because they walked in the cool of the day, you know, they worked in the garden, everything was perfect. You know, when they had a question, they went directly to the Lord, directly to the Father. And then after they ate that fruit, whatever it might be, after they ate that, they had knowledge of good and evil. The evil is pretty clear to see, but the knowledge of the good may be even worse. because the good gets in the way of God. Because when we have a decision to make, maybe I'm just preaching to myself, but I have a decision to make and I go, oh, well, I know what's good, I'll make this decision. Instead of going to God, right? And that's sometimes acknowledging our ways. So don't think just because you're making an evil decision, those are clear. The devil is really good at giving you two options, and the right option is the third option. And you're not going to know that there's a third option unless you go to God. Because the devil will give you a really clear evil one and one that looks okay, right? And you'll go down the okay one because you didn't pray and you didn't ask God what the right decision is, and there's an even better one over here.
Right. It said something yesterday about not being black and white, not black and white. Right.
Well, yeah, that's kind of a deep topic. But okay, let's go to 7 and 8. Who'd like to read?
Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bone.
Okay. Do you think we have a problem today with wise in our own eyes?
His life experience gives us wisdom, but comes from the Bible.
Yeah, you look at Jacob, right? He started out very arrogant, right? And then he got humbled deeply, right? Even wrestling God, right? And he was so arrogant, but he became very humble at the end, right? And sometimes that's us. You know, we get wise in our own eyes. And then fear the Lord and depart from evil. Well, there's a lot of the world that doesn't fear the Lord, and that's pretty self-evident. And then what's the connection here with your health? How is this connected to the bones and to there's a theme about bones and health. How do we practically apply that to our lives?
Bad habits.
Bad habits.
I'm doing bad habits. I'm not doing good habits.
What did the Lord say about being anxious? How many times does the Bible say not to fear?
Quite a lot.
Depending on your translation, it's up to 365 times, which I don't think is a strange thing. It's a number of days, right? So, you know, I think we have a lot of people that fear, they put the fear in the wrong things, not in God, right? The fear should be only in the Lord, not in these other things, with the exception of snakes. If a rattlesnake's in front of me, I'm gonna fear him. But other than that, you know, even that, I've got my hose, so I'll be fine, or the shovel.
That's good.
But
Well, the cross references I'm getting for that are more talking about our speech. Pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. And then the other one is
what about bitterness? But that's good to have a positive one.
a cheerful look brings joy to the heart, and good news gives health to the bones.
There you go. And bitterness, what, rots the bones? Isn't that what I think I think that's scripture. I may be misquoting, but I know there's something on bitterness and bones, I believe. And your health. So you have both there. I would say that, you know, a lot of this, you know, we have an epidemic right now of depression. And, you know, they're the exact opposite of everything Salvador just told us what the scriptures say. You know, to think on things that are pleasant, think on things. And my opinion, try to be clear when it's my opinion versus the word, but my opinion is that depression, person is very self-focused. You get so into yourself that it's depressing, right? And it's my experience, the best medicine for that is to go volunteer, change your focus, get away from yourself. The more you're away from yourself, the better your outlook is. If I just focus on my problems all day long, my problems grow, right? If I focus on God, I see how much bigger God is than my problems, and I don't have a depressed state, right? Go ahead.
Good verse you were looking for. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up bones.
Yeah, crushed spirit.
So a crushed spirit is one like even when we try to share the word with someone, if we do it in a hostile and aggressive manner, just because it's good news, they don't take it as such. They'll crush their bones versus uplifting.
Yeah, Jesus just said, "Follow me," right? That was his altar call. Follow me, right? Go ahead.
Fear, depression, and anxiety, things like that. I think a lot of that is also spending a lot of time leaning on yourself, thinking you have to fix everything. And in the Bible, everywhere the battle isn't fought ourselves; it's fought by God. And these things, if we would trust in Him, He'll take care of everything we need, whether it's what we think we need or not. He'll take care of our actual needs. But all that anxiety and the fear and depression is putting your joy in the wrong place and putting your eyes on the wrong things and thinking that I've done the anxiety, depression, thinking that you have to fix and take care of everything. And what a heavy load that is. And it's a heavy load we don't have to bear. We're not supposed to bear.
No, there's a reason he calls us sheep, right? Sheep are not load bearing. He didn't call us donkeys. Donkeys, you saddle things on and they carry a load. We're sheep. We're not supposed to carry the load. He's supposed to carry the load for us. And the only other thing I'll say on that front is just Ephesians 6. It's spiritual. And that's not an excuse to not do the work, but you need to lead in the spirit realm and then do the work. It's not an either or. We have a lot of people that do the either or, you know. Well, I'm going to go fight the spiritual battle, and then they do nothing in the natural. And it's both. As Deion Sanders famously said, both. All right. 9 and 10, who'd like to read?
It says, honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine.
And we kind of talked about this at the men's Bible study yesterday, but you know, there's that story of the guy that had the bountiful harvest, and he says, I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger ones so I can, you know, lay up and not have to work, right? And then he was judged that very night, right? So this is part of the problem he had, and the problem so many of us have, is we don't honor the Lord with our first fruits and the blessings. The Lord doesn't need it. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, which means every hill. But he knows that us giving will keep our heart open. So we're like Tony Evans famously said, don't be a cul-de-sac Christian, right? Where the blessing stops at you, right? The blessing should flow through you. At the point where you become a cul-de-sac Christian, then God can't trust you to keep blessing, right? So if you're not blessing others, if the blessing isn't flowing through you, then don't be surprised if the blessing stops, because he's probably going to get your attention and try to get you on the right path. Okay. And I think about my garden. So I told this morning. At my old house, I had a garden, and put a lot of money in it. And the first year, I think I averaged $100 a tomato. The second year, I tried to work on a few things, tweak on a few things, but I still complained, and I got it down to $20 a tomato. Then the third year, I got convicted. I said, I'm complaining too much and not praying. So I'm going to pray, I'm going to stop complaining, and then I'm going to honor him, because I'm going to give some of the produce to Manna House to feed people. Then all of a sudden my garden, boom, just blew up. And I had tomatoes I was going everywhere with tomatoes and spinach and all the, I did both. I did the natural, worked on my irrigation, I did other things, but I also prayed, gave it to God, right? And that's how we kind of need to be with life, right? We need to stop complaining, start praying more. We need to give him the fruits, and that doesn't have to always be money. We get so focused on money. That can be our service like we did yesterday. It can be, whatever you're doing, if you're making crafts, that you donate some of your crafts to people that can't afford it, whatever it is, understand that the Bible said your first fruits, it's the fruits of your labor. It can be money, but it can also be other things, right? Okay. So be reflecting on that. Think about how you can apply that in your life. What areas may you not be, given the first fruits? I think I kind of got convicted on the way here. One of the areas in my life. 11 through 12.
My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in.
Okay. So, a couple of things. Sometimes I like to read these the opposite way, right? So, one of the things that you might ask yourself is, if you're not being disciplined by God, are you really his son, right? So, like, those of us who have kids, your kids come over, I discipline my kids, but I don't discipline other people's kids, right? I might kind of say that's how the rules operate in our house, but I don't go disciplining other people's kids, because they're their kids, right? And that's kind of how God is. He disciplines us. So we may be looking on the outside like this person on the outside looks like everything's sweet in their lives and they're not getting disciplined. Well, they're going to get the fruits of that harvest, right? And, a lot of times, we're living for the eternity, not the here and the now. Their blessings may be the here and the now. Remember the rich man and Lazarus, right? He got those good things, right, in his life. And Lazarus didn't. And now Lazarus, in that case, is getting all those good things. The discipline, it sounds negative, but understand discipline, the real meaning is to teach and to train. So he's teaching and training. We're teaching and training our children. God teaches and trains us. And if we look at the discipline that way, and we understand that that discipline is going to take us further than we could ever go, then we would rejoice and delight in it, like it's saying here, as opposed to, you know, like when I'm in one of those times, like one of the prayers I say often is like, okay, God, I know I'm in the desert, but help me to learn quickly what I need to here, because I don't want to spend 40 years in the desert, right, circling. So I know there's a purpose in this, so help me to learn it, you know, and not have to circle the desert. Anybody been there, or is it just me?
So my Bible cross references back to Hebrews 12.
Yep. We talked about that this morning. Go ahead and read it.
My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are illegitimate children and not true sons. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? Our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it.
Absolutely. That's a great verse, the harvest of righteousness and peace. And, you know, I think you had a quote this morning, right, on the study with the kids.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. They did a study where they had 2 playgrounds or 2 schoolyards, fields, whatever you call it. One they fenced off the perimeter, and the other they left unfenced. And it turns out when you take the fences away, all the kids would congregate really close to the school. They wouldn't venture out at all. But having guardrails up, having this sort of perimeter that blocks them from going out, actually gave them a sense of boundary where they would play anywhere within that boundary.
It's like a hedge of protection.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like if you have a sense of guidance, even though the idea is even though rules tell you what not to do, they still can give you more freedom by giving you guardrails.
Yeah, I think of like my wife who teaches at DAEP, you know, Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, and she gets the kids that, you know, try to blow up the school or, you know, assault or other things, and she runs a firm classroom, but she does it a lot of love. And I've talked with her before. I said, you know, are you worried for your safety there with some of these kids? Because some of them are huge, you know. I mean, they're 17 and 300 pounds, 6'5", you know, or something like that. And I said, are you worried about your safety? And she goes, no. He said, because those kids love me. And if one of them goes after me, they're going to have to get through 10 kids to get to me, right? Because she runs that classroom with love, but also discipline, so they all know the rules and they respect her. They respond to that. Okay, let's go on to 13 through 15.
Happy is the man who finds wisdom and understanding. Well, supposed to be better about silver or gain find gold. He won't get the rules. Common things may desire to
So here, you know, happy is the man who finds wisdom and gains understanding, right? So there's 2 factors. You can get the wisdom, but then you got to learn how to apply it, which is the understanding, right? So there's 2 phases there. it's wisdom applied, kind of think of it that way, or that's how I think about it. And then, we've talked about this before, but this whole precious metals thing, think about how precious metals are actually gathered, right? You gotta mine for them, you gotta refine them by fire and chiseling and all that before you get to them. So that it's not a loss to say that he's comparing it to precious metals, here. And then the thing is there's also the contrast, because they're better than that, because the silver can corrode, right? The silver can steal your heart, right? You can start stacking silver or gold, your heart can go towards that, right? But thank you. What'd you have, Bob?
Sometimes it's being taught the right way, growing up and everything, that's what mine.
Yeah. The instruction. So, the other thing is the happiness, right? I mean, how many people do you know that are rich and happy? I mean, one of the richest guys, is the CEO of BlackRock, the owner of BlackRock. I'm trying to think of his name now, lost it. But, the guy, everybody that knows him says he's miserable, right? And you think things will bring you happiness, but they don't, right? Like so many things, like Solomon, he had, 700 wives and 300 concubines? So think how many mother-in-laws he had, right?
That's where we go with it.
Right? So you got to think through these things to, imagine the logistics, right? How many wives are going to be unhappy today? If you had 700 of them, right? There's no reason. There's probably a strong reason why he talks about a leaky roof and an unhappy wife and all that, because he had 700 of them, right? So he had it in spades, right? So
he says he'd rather sleep on the corner of a rooftop than in a home with a full supply.
Yep, exactly, because he had more than a few, I bet. Statistics show with 700 of them, you're going to end up there, right? Didn't think through that plan, all that wisdom he had, the applying of it, the understanding part kind of slipped there. Okay, let's go on to 16 through 18.
Length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and her paths are peace. All her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who retain her.
So there's a couple of things here. You get this imagery, wisdom is a lady in this case, much, from a poetic standpoint, kind of like we call a ship the lady's name, that kind of stuff. And then you get this left or right hand, and we get people that are unbalanced. They're trying to either lengthen their days or they're trying to chase riches, and he's saying, no, if you do wisdom, you're going to get a happy balance of both, right? We have people that, there's a Netflix series of this guy that's trying to live forever, right? He's trying to reverse his age. And the extreme things he does is just incredible. He eats this small meal that's got to be taste-terrible, every day, and then he works out for just tons of hours, and he takes all these supplements, and he's reversed his age by a few years, but in the long run, how much happiness does he have, right? He's gone to the extreme, and of course he doesn't know God. He's trying to live forever, but, and then we've already talked about the riches, right? And how deceiving that can be. And here we get this picture that if you pursue her, not just her left and her right hand, but you pursue her, which is, she encompasses both, right? Then you're gonna have peace, you're gonna have pleasantness, and it's a tree of life that those who take hold, right? The tree of life gets us back to the garden, the imagery, right? The healing is in the leaves of the trees, Revelation, right? And in the garden, the tree of life, where they keep that fruit and they live forever, right? So in heaven, that's what we're going to have, is that tree of life, that eternal, life. And then happy are all, notice the verbs here, you take hold and then you retain. So it's not good enough to grab wisdom, you gotta keep hold of it, right? So the world is gonna try to distract you and take you off, and for you to release wisdom and go down a foolish path. Not that any of y'all would do it, it's probably just me going down a foolish path, but that's what this imagery is telling us here. So how do we take hold of wisdom, and how do we retain it?
We learn to experience.
What?
We learn to experience. I mean, we mess up, of course, but we learn our own experiences.
When we touch the stove and get burned, we learn quickly not to touch the stove again.
Right.
That's one way.
And Proverbs speaks about wisdom as being like a person who's calling actively to people. Like a woman calling in the city center, listen to me.
But we've got to listen, right? And isn't the world good about distracting us so that we won't hear wisdom?
Our own predictions can also things that I know. Our own predictions see what's not to do and what to do.
And sometimes I would say that we tend to choose comfort over wisdom, right? Because there's a lot of things that are comfortable that are not wise, right?
Even in the learning and your experience and learning through, listening to other people, you still, in your own convictions, you still have to be pouring the right things into you in order to have the right convictions instead of the wrong convictions. So, still all goes back to time spent in prayer and the Bible, the conversation with God. Otherwise, you can be convicted to do a lot of stupid stuff.
Absolutely. And investing your time wisely, like pursuing the wisdom, right? I mean, like I have a really tough commute to work now downtown. So that's the bad news. The good news is I get 3, almost 4 hours of podcasts in, right? So I can listen to Christian podcasts. I can, get my Bible time in, get teaching. I can get things that are fruitful in on that time. And in some ways it's forced, time alone to dig deeper, right? So let's go on to 19 and 20.
By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations, by understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge the deeps were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew.
You see Solomon with all of his wisdom. You see this in the first chapter of Ecclesiastes too. It kind of talks about the whole cycle of the earth. You see that he had great knowledge of all of these things way before science caught up with him on a lot of this. And you see that wisdom founded the earth, and then understanding the heavens, and then the deeps were broken up with knowledge, and all of this that's in the earth. So, if we try to lean on our own understanding or our own wisdom, how shallow is that compared to God's wisdom? understanding, right? So a lot of times, you know, if we just get just a touch of God's wisdom, then it's gonna help us get that next step right, right? That one path where he's lighting just your feet, right? He probably doesn't tell us too much because it overwhelms, right? You know? I mean, if we would have known, you know, I adopted 4 children. I adopted the 2 girls that came from a hard place, right? And they had come from abuse and all that. And if he had told me all the trials that I'm gonna have by adopting them, I probably would have bailed on it. I would have said, no thank you, you know? But I would have missed out on the blessing. And those trials, you know, got me in a deeper relationship with the Lord. So those trials were part of that discipline that we talked about, of him disciplining me and him bringing me to a deeper level, you know, in my faith. When we all have those trials in our lives, but those trials and those times get us deeper into the Word, deeper into him, where we actually depend on the Lord and not on our own understanding. And we realize that we need his understanding. You get to a point where you say, not my will, Lord, but yours, because I know where this leads. I've touched the stove too many times. I've got the Jeep stuck too many times in the deep mud. I've been four-wheeling. No, thank you. I want your way. I want to stay on the straight and narrow, not to the left, not to the right. You know, I want advice from you. And too many times we're like Joshua, right? Remember Joshua 1, right? You're not to the left or right. And you remember with Jericho, right? The angel of the Lord shows up. First thing out of Joshua's mouth, whose side are you? Are you for me or against me? What does the angel of the Lord say?
Neither.
Neither. He says, I come with the heavens' armies. See, it was a wrong question. We tend to think of it like Joshua, or my side or your side. We should be asking God, where are you going? Because I'm going with you. Not my ways, not yes or no on this decision. Where are you going? Because that's where I want to go. Right? Where are you moving? Open my eyes. Let me see where you're moving. Let me see where to step the next step so that I can get closer to you, that I can abide in you, that I can...
Not my will be done, but that thy will be done.
Exactly.
We
So
think of it self-centered, is it my side or their side, but we should be thinking about it God-centered, is it God's side or the people's
Right.
side? We do tend to think of everything from here.
Yeah. We tend to think, and then even when we, you know, like I think it was Joshua when he made the compromise with the Gideonites, right? They fooled him, right? They came with their old clothes and the old worn, you know, thing. We've traveled a long way. We're just passing through. And Joshua made a covenant with them because he trusted in his eyes and he didn't pray first, right? And it looked real obvious, you know. Sure, we'll make a covenant. You're just traveling through, not knowing that he was being fooled. And sometimes that's us, right? We rely on things. We go, oh, this looks easy. This is a layup, right? And then we move before we inquire of the Lord. And we fall into a trap. Right? So, okay, anything else? We're gonna probably stop there, so we're on track with next week.
So that's why it's always, sometimes you have trials and tribulations in their life. More trials and tribulations, more we get, on one side.
Yeah, those trials get us closer to the Lord, right? Without those trials, you know, I mean, think of, we talked about Peter, right? Denying the Lord 3 times, right? He denied the Lord, but look at how he finished, right? He had to go through that valley. He had to give up, decide I'm going back fishing, right? And then the Lord met him right where he was at Restoration Beach, as they call it, and called him there and said, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? 3 times for his 3 denials, and restored him. And then he came changed. And then he was the Peter that was able to walk that walk, you know, and to follow in Jesus' footsteps, and to be crucified even upside down, right?
Is Peter the rough, father of Christian, Johnson? That's the Catholic.
What? Yeah, he's the first pope, if you will. I think the Catholic Church believes that, but they take that one verse kind of literally, or we could talk about that, but that's a whole nother rabbit trail. When he said, on this rock I will build my church, he was standing on a mountain. There was a rock there too, but there's multiple meanings for that. We covered that.
Do you want me to start the video?
Yeah.